ladies and gentlemen, we left off suffragettes last time with them getting suffrage or the ability to vote. So we left off with the Reform Act of 1928, in which women over the age of 21 years old get the right to vote instead of age 30 and up. And so we need to go on to another question in England after women have gained. Is the Irish question. So, England has had Ireland since 1801. We covered that in this class. We talked about how England came into the possession. And now we're going to have a question here, it's called the Irish question. Who should be in charge of Ireland? Remember, we're going to have some nationalism stir up. So just like the Young Italians, we're going to have the Young Ireland movement here. Shouldn't an Irish person be in charge? Shouldn't we have home rule? Shouldn't we be autonomous or have charge of ourselves? And so if you remember, we have had the Irish since Cromwell coming in during that time period, all the way back there, Ireland taken into England, and there's still been kind of this hate relationship between the Irish and the English from the things that Cromwell did to the Irish when incorporating Ireland into England. And so we're going to get the Young Ireland movement. It's going to be similar to the Young Italy movement. It's a nationalist movement to free Ireland or to make it its own entity. This is going to be in 1848 and echoes these nationalistic movements that we've seen on the continent. The Irish question will be the most reoccurring and serious problem Britain will face from 1890 to 1940. And this is that fact where the Irish say, I want an Irish rule, and the English say, oh no, we want you to be part of us, it's beneficial to us. So we're going to have some going back and forth here. Gladstone, who was our liberal, is going to be the biggest supporter of our Irish home rule. He is going to encourage total independence for Ireland, and he is not going to be successful in doing this, but he will be able to rid the Protestant or the Catholic Irish from paying a tithe to the English Anglican Church. So he will get rid of that tithe for the Irish, although he will not be successful in getting the entire Irish rule done. If you remember, we have most of our Irish being Catholic. They are living on Protestant lands owned by the English. And so we have them having to pay taxes to the English church, which is causing problems, and the Catholics do not like this. So we're going to have a lot of problems going on between the Catholic Irish and the English Protestant at this time. So this is where we get Ulster. These are Protestant countries in Northern Ireland, and they are going to say, hey, you know what? I like being British. It's benefiting me being English. I am making some money off of this deal, and they are going to be the Irish who oppose Irish home rule because they had started to enjoy being British. They are in the north of Ireland, and it's pretty much them versus the rest of Ireland. They're like, hey, this isn't so bad. Like, I'm getting to own land now, and I'm Protestant too, and this is pretty good. I don't want to be just Ireland because I might lose some of my economic growth. The Ulsterites, which is what they will become known as, will raise 100,000 armed volunteers by 1913 trying to prevent home rule. So they're trying to stop the Young Irish movement. By 1914, the Irish Home Rule Act will be passed by the Commons, by the House of Commons and the House of Lords, but the Protestants in Ulster will not accept it. And so the English are going to say, yeah, okay, leading up to World War I, we're going to give you this act. It's going to give you some autonomy. But the Protestants in England and in Ulster will not accept it. Yes, Sam, did you have a question?
So like the Ulsterites, they were in Northern Ireland. They raised up this army. Did they ever actually fight the British, or was it just? Because it wouldn't make sense to fight the British.
No, they're fighting the Irish who want home rule. So they're trying to hold down the Young Irish movement.
So was the Young Irish movement like this militant group, or did they just terrorize?
No, they are just more terrorizing, trying to get this. They're kind of like our Young Italy movement, so they're moving just in waves. They're trying to take territories that are in Ireland and enforce, Irish governments there. They're also trying to act through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, through Gladstone, also with political movement as well. And Gladstone won't get this done, but he will allow them some autonomy by not making them pay the English church anymore. So some of it's political, some of it's our grassroots like nationalism out in the countryside, just like we saw in Italy.
Okay, but like if like the British House of Commons passes the Irish Home Rule Act,
Yes.
they passed it. It didn't get enacted, but
Right.
if they passed it, then that means they're going against the British who passed the Home Rule Act, even though they consider themselves British. So
Oh, well, the Home Rule Act gets enforced after these armed. So this is a reaction to this fighting that's going on between the Ulsterites and those who want home Irish rule. And so finally the English are like, leading up to 1914, what happens in 1914? World War I. So the British are kind of preoccupied with other things. They're like, sure, it's an act. It's not complete autonomy, but it's more autonomy than they've had since 1801. And so it's trying to appease them.
Okay.
However, the Protestants are going to be like, both sides are going to be unhappy. First of all, the Catholics are going to say this isn't enough autonomy. The Protestants are going to say this hurts me. I want to be part of England. And so what's going to happen next then is that people think that England is going to be too busy with World War I and what's going on there to do anything about it. And so this is where we get the Easter Rebellion of 1916. And so implementation of the Irish Home Act has been delayed because of World War I. And so these Irish believe, hey, England's really busy with this World War I stuff. I bet we can cause a rebellion and go ahead and get complete autonomous rule if we attack at this time. And so some of the Irish can't wait. They refuse to wait until things are settled with World War I. But remember, most people don't think they're going to be waiting that long. They thought the Great War would be very short and won pretty quickly. But this isn't going to be the case, as we know in retrospect. So in 1960, we get what is known as the Easter Rebellion. And this is a rebellion for independence, and it will be crushed by the British troops because the Irish underestimate that the British are willing to pull troops back home to squash them. They think that they will just be able to do what they want because the British are busy with World War I. So this is going to take place in Dublin. And the British troops are going to come back over and squash this revolt. And then in 1922, Ireland will finally gain its independence. Northern Ireland, however, will remain part of the British Empire. And this really sets us up for some modern-day controversies. We still have problems today. Probably not as much as you remember, but pre-Clinton administration. Before Clinton, you would see stuff in the news pretty regularly about revolts of those who still wanted Irish Home Rule and those who don't. Clinton did a pretty good job with some peace negotiations during his term there, so you don't hear quite as much. But there's still a struggle going on between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland because of these struggles now. So you have to look back a little bit further, but once in a while if you watch the world news, you'll see a little cropping up of some problems in some provinces in Ireland. And so this definitely has not been settled, even as of yet, of Protestants and Catholics. Did you have a question, Tyler? When did Ireland get their independence? Right here, 1920 or 1922. But still problems today. So we've had the Irish question. Now we need to ask our Eastern question. I have Easter Rebellion on my mind. So the Eastern question, we've answered the Irish question. They get their independence in 1922, although problems still playing out there today. We have the 1870s now. And so we're heading back over to the Ottoman Empire, our sick man of Europe, and what's going to happen because the Ottoman Empire is not holding it together as we move into World War I. So as the Ottoman Empire is going to recede into southern Europe, we are going to see a constant state of crisis exist in the Balkans. Even Bismarck had said if a problem emerges out of Europe, it'll start in the Balkans. So he's pretty correct there. And it's over who should control this region. Now that our big Ottoman Empire is losing some steam and is being pushed all the way back, other people are going to step up and say, I should have right to be over this area. And it's a very multi-ethnic area, which is one of the problems, which is why the Balkans, and well, as you guys can see today, still spark so much controversy and over who should be in ownership. And so we've talked about the Crimean War that took place here in the Balkans, and so now we're going to start to see, after the Crimean War, who starts to compete for this territory. So Russia has had a dream ever since Catherine the Great to hold this territory in the Balkans area and ultimately make Constantinople, the old capital of the Byzantine Empire, the cradle of the Orthodox Russian Church. So if you remember, we talked about first Rome, second Rome. They would like to make this the third Rome, and to have it under the Russian rule. And then we have the Austro-Hungarians, who have designs on the area as well, because they are right there, they are close, and they feel that they should have some say-so over this territory. And so this is called Balkanization. Has anybody heard balkanization used in a modern sense? Okay. Sometimes people would say the United States is balkanizing, meaning we have groups developing very common groups rather than just being American. They identify themselves as to their state or their region more, than being a Midwesterner or a Missourian more than being an American. That's called balkanizing.
I thought that was like sexualism.
It's also kind of sexualism, but sometimes you'll hear it referred to as balkanization, where you start to identify more by tenets of those things than you do as an overall nationality, and that's because the Balkan area is so ethnically diverse. America is becoming very ethnically diverse, even within cities and states. And so sometimes you hear it referred to as balkanization, splitting into groups. Yeah, splitting into groups that you identify with more than just the larger group. And so with the Russians, we're going to see what is known as Pan-Slavism. And this is the idea of uniting all Slavs in Europe under one government. And what government would Russia want to be in charge of all of these Slavs? The Russians, yeah. So that's what they're going to propose here. And the Balkans have a lot of Slavs. This is going to equal nationalism. Okay, this is going to be, they're going to, remember, we said they're going to be manipulating nationalism to get things done. And so we're going to see in 1877 to 1878 the Russo-Turkish War. We're going to see the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, so weakening the Ottoman Empire even more. But Russia's military victory over the Ottoman Empire by 1878 will put it in that prime position that it wants to dominate the Balkans. It wants to take the Balkan area. But Britain is going to refuse to accept Russian control of the Balkans and send the Royal Navy to help the Turks. Why would Great Britain want to keep the Russians from having the Balkans? What would that give them access to? The Mediterranean, the Black Sea, to having a warm water port and a place to move their navy. Okay, that would not bode well for Great Britain, who thinks that the Mediterranean is their what? Yeah, their lake. They see it as their lake. Okay, so this wouldn't work out for them. So, Britain, who had lost their gut to fight, after the Crimean War, is going to shake this off a little bit right here, and they are going to send their navy in to support the Turks to keep the Russians out. And this nationalistic spirit is going to become known as Jingoism, and you can still find all kinds of cool references to Jingoism. It's a very nationalistic viewpoint, and it comes from within a poem. It's kind of a chauvinistic bullying, nationalism, we are better than you, nana. And so the British, here's what the poem says. We don't want to fight, because remember they don't want to because of the Crimean War. We don't want to fight, but by Jingo, if we do. So what does by Jingo mean? What does it sound like it means to you? Yeah, by Jesus, by God, by gosh. So we don't want to fight, but by Jingo, if we do, we've got the ships, we've got the men, we've got the money too. We fought the bear. So what's the bear? Russia. Before, and we beat them too. And then this whole poem starts to stop rhyming and doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's Jingoism. We don't want to fight you, but as a nationality, as an ethnicity, if we do, we're gonna whoop up on you. That's what Jingoism is, and that's what Britain uses to pull themselves in here. Bismarck is going to see this happening, Otto von Bismarck, and he's going to say, hey, let me step in as this new leader guy of Prussia. Let me step in, and I will mediate this crisis for you. So sorry you guys are having problems. Let me step in and mediate this. And he is going to call all of them to come to the Congress of Berlin. If you look down at number 4 at the bottom of this page, this is very important. If you get a question about the Congress of Berlin, please, especially if it's an FRQ, do not confuse it with the Berlin Conference. These are two very different events. You do not want to confuse these. The Congress of Berlin is going to take place in 1878 in Germany, and it's going to take place directly following this this Pan-Slavism, this Russo-Turkish war. We're going to see the Berlin Conference being something very different. So make sure you've taken note of that, because you will get like 1 point for putting your pencil on paper if you start talking about Congress of Berlin when you're supposed to be talking about the Berlin Conference. All right? So Congress of Berlin, Russia is going to gain little from this conference despite defeating the Turks in the war. Highlight this. Okay, this is another one of those, wait a second, I thought that the Russians won. Why aren't they getting anything? And so we're going to see that Bismarck and places like England are going to hold Russia down because of their fear of what will happen if Russia expands. So they're going to get very little here. What does happen, however, is Bismarck and Great Britain are going to be split up the Balkans and divvy them out. And so we're going to see the recognition now of Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro as independent countries. That's important. These areas still have problems today because they're declared independent, okay, from this time period. We have the establishment of the Autonomous Principality of Bulgaria. We have the Austrian acquisition of Bosnia and Herzegovina near Serbia, modern-day Serbia. We have the transfer of Cyprus, which is an island in the east end of the Mediterranean, to Great Britain, not far from the Suez Canal, so they very much wanted this. And though Disraeli, if you remember, who's Disraeli? Yeah, he is British Prime Minister, and he was conservative or liberal? Conservative. He is our conservative. I always remember CD, conservative, Disraeli, was most responsible for the agreements. Okay? So we have Otto von Bismarck saying, I will be the mediator. But we have Disraeli, who, Great Britain, great power, who came in and stopped the Russians, making most of these decisions. Although Disraeli is responsible for the agreements, Russia is going to blame Bismarck. Underline Russia going to blame Bismarck. We're going to see that Russia blames Bismarck. So Russia's blaming what country? Germany, okay? Our Prussia's really. So Russia and Germany are going to start to have some disagreements here. And what's coming up in 1914? World War I, okay? So keep that in mind. So we're going to start to see two sides develop in Europe. Germany's going to be on one side. Russia's going to be on the other. Okay, so Russian hostility toward Germany led Bismarck to embark upon a new system of alliances, which transformed European diplomacy and effectively killed the remnants of the concert of Europe. So if you thought any of that concert of Europe was hanging on, this is the death of that. This is also the beginning of some secret alliances. Does anybody know the main causes of World War I? MAIN? Militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism. Okay? It had pretty effectively, if there were any pieces of let's try to keep this together right here, this is it. Because now we're polarizing. We have two sides, two camps developing. Okay? So, next we need to go back to some socialism. So, socialist movements, what's going on, post-industrialism? So, this part should take about 10 minutes. I'm going to go kind of fast. We've already talked about this as it pertains to each country. Just a review of socialist movements. So, socialist movements in the age of mass politics. How is socialism doing with all this new democracy floating around? Largely, we're going to see socialist movements as a response, a negative response, to industrialism and nationalism. Socialists are opposed to industrialism because it hurts the worker. They're also opposed to nationalism because they feel that is calling you to respect your state. Because what would Marx have said? Workers of the what unite? Workers of the world, not workers of Germany, workers of France, workers of Britain, workers of the world. Bless you. So socialists are going to say that nationalism is a manipulation tool used by the government. Okay? So, main goal of socialist movements is to advance the cause of the proletariat or worker throughout Europe. They see nationalism as a tool or a manipulation used by the ruling class or those in power to divert public attention away from social issues. They are generally socialist, opposed to war, because who tends to die in wars or have to go fight the wars? The lower class, the working class, okay? Not the bourgeoisie, not the upper middle class, it's the workers. And so socialists are generally opposed to war prior to 1914, since the working class disproportionately suffered casualties on the front lines. And you need to know here that they're anti-nationalist. Okay? They would say you'd be too busy going, yay, I'm German, to realize, hey, but oh, really, I'm a worker. And I need to worry about that before I need to worry about being a German. Marxism led the negative response to industrialism. Remember Mr. Marx? He is going to die in this time period, 1863, with the 12 peoples that showed up to his funeral. And then, but in 1864, we're going to see socialists unite in the First International. And Marx had been one of the people who've been trying to organize this before his death. They're trying to get workers across the world to unite. And we see the growth of socialist parties after 1871. We've already talked about these. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. The SPD in Germany, France, Belgium, Austria, Hungary. We've already seen them. In 1883, socialists, even though there aren't a lot of socialists in Russia. Can you imagine why there wouldn't be a lot of socialists in Russia at this time? Nope, not communism yet.
There's no middle class?
There's a little middle class, but what kind of people would you need for socialism to exist? Working class, yeah, factory workers. Has Russia industrialized yet? No. Okay, so it's not as big of a deal there. But for the few that are there, they're going to be exiled from Russia, and they are going to be sent to Switzerland, and that is where the SPD will grow very rapidly. Next, we're going to get another form of socialism called revisionism. Revisionism is just socialist revisionism. What's it mean to revise something? Yeah, fix it, change it. And so these social revisionists are going to take the idea of socialism and revise it. They are going to change it. As workers, how many people can vote in Britain right now? Yeah, pretty much 70%, almost universal suffrage, now women as well. How many people can vote in France? All of the males, okay? So as workers have gained the right to vote and participate politically in the nation state, their attention is going to focus more on elections than on revolutions, okay? So revisionist socialists are going to say we can get what we want done through voting, not by revolting. Okay? So workers' standard of living is going to also gradually rise after 1850, thus no need to revolt. We're also going to see the growth of labor unions that will start to protect the rights of the workers and get them what they want, so no need to revolt. What was Marx all about? Revolt, revolt, revolt. So revisionists are going to be like, I don't think you need to. We're getting what we want without that. So just a couple of our revisionist socialists. You'll see we have Jean Jaurès, who was formerly our revisionist doctrine, had repudiated revisionist doctrines in order to establish a unified socialist party, although he will remain at heart a revisionist in practice. So he's such a revisionist that he even revises the revisionists. Okay, so he's going to be our important revisionist from France. But the guy you really need to know is Eduard Bernstein. He is a German. He gives us his work up here on the board, as you can see, Evolutionary Socialism in 1899. He is the most prominent of our socialist revisionists. He argued Marx's predictions of ever greater poverty for workers and ever greater concentration of wealth for the wealthy have been proved false. He's like, look, guys, we can already tell you Marx is false. You don't need to revolt. It's already proven. Living conditions are already better. Our working conditions are already better. Wages have gone up. We're getting to vote. So it's already proven that we do not need to follow a strict Marxist socialism. So the impact of socialism on European politics, however, is going to become profound by the late 19th century. Here I'm going to go really quickly too, because we already discussed all of this with each country. So in Germany, of course, you had the SPD. Bismarck had been forced in this time period to institute sweeping reforms in order to minimize the threat from the left. And so we saw that he tried to push socialism under the rug, but he was not able to. But we're going to see that socialism continues to be an important factor in Germany. By 1912, the SPD will be the largest party in the Reichstag by World War I. In France, socialists are going to be led by Mr. Jean Jaurès that I just told you about, and he will gain seats in the Chamber of Deputies from 1905 to 1914. In England, if you remember, we had the Fabian Society, which is named after that Roman general Fabius, who was known for his delaying tactics, so socialism in England. We also have Guy Hardy, who led the Independent Labour Party in England. And so all of these things, setting the foundations for the social welfare state, for socialism, leading us up to World War I. And then if you'll turn, we're going to have another group of socialists. This one might be a little more familiar to you, known as anarchists. Have become more popular as time goes on. So we're going to have anarchists who grow out of the revisionist socialist movement. And anarchists, their whole line of thinking is pretty easy. They want to get rid of the government. It doesn't matter how, they just want to. They believe there should be no state. So you remember Marx's plan? So like workers of the world unite, right? And then what would those workers of the world do after they unite? They would overthrow the bourgeoisie, and then they would be in control of the state for a little while. And then ultimately, in Marxist theory, what happens last? After the working class rules the state or government for a while? Yeah, and then there wouldn't be a need for a government at all, and you'd end up with a Marxist utopia. And so the anarchists are going to be like, let's skip all of those steps and go straight to no government. Like, let's just do that. And so anarchists say whatever you do to get rid of the government is what you need to do. So they seek to destroy or kill the centralized state or government. Mikhail Bakunin is going to be our most famous. He's a Russian nobleman, and he will become the most influential of the anarchists. He is going to say that the true anarchist, it is moral to do whatever it takes to get rid of the state. What is unmoral is not doing anything. So he would say even if you're a person who's passive and not doing anything, you are doing the wrong thing. He said the only right thing to do is to get rid of the state. Even if you have to use terror, even if you have to be a terrorist, it is right as long as it is getting rid of the state. So if you have to bomb the Capitol, if you have to assassinate the leader, that is what is right because it will get rid of the state. And so whatever means are necessary would be proposed by anarchists. And so we are going to get political assassinations all over the place here. Okay, we're going to see the assassinations by anarchists shake the political world with the deaths of 6 national leaders between 1881 and 1901. Alexander II of Russia will be assassinated. It's grenades and snowballs. Like, how crazy is it to go out like that? So, like, grenades covered in snowball and like a snowball fight. We'll see King Umberto I of Italy in 1900 be assassinated. And then our very own President William McKinley of the United States in 1901 by Leon Cholson. Is that the Cholson I always... It's not as fun, no 3-name guy, but ended up killing President McKinley during these anarchist assassinations.
Were any American presidents ever assassinated by a non-American?
By a non-American? Not that this guy was non-American but had immigrated. He was part of the socialist anarchist movements.
All
Yeah.
Americans, unless you're native, are
Garfield was
Yeah.
a French guy.
What?
Garfield was
Yeah, French guy. And this guy is, I hate to say, I think Russian though. I would have to look, but Yeah, I mean, but by the last name, I'm pretty sure Russian. I will make sure. But Leon Schultzkin, I think we can check into that. Anyway, but he hears all of this stuff and he's like, yeah, I will take out the state. Anyway, so speaking of Russia and my total assumption on his name that he was Russian, Russia. So the 19th century Russia is still 100 years behind, ladies and gents. They're going to try to do some catching up, but still 100 years behind. Their defeat in the Crimean War will mark a turning point with Russian history by fostering modernization. You can say the Crimean War, you can get away with, I mean, I would take this as evidence in a paper, was a turning point, a wake-up call for Russia. It said, whoa, 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 we are not ready to match anyone out there, and that we need to modernize or we are going to fall completely behind. In 1850, we're still very much an agricultural economy in Russia, but not a successful one, not like a thriving like agricultural revolution. England or Netherlands, we're not a very successful. We have serfs working. We're still using the open field system. Does anybody remember what time period we last talked about people using the open field system? Yeah, medieval. So they are still using that system, so they're way behind. We didn't have any 1848 revolutions like we had across the continent, so everything's behind there. So we have lots of ethnicities, and so we're going to see how that causes problems. So 19th century Russia, we are behind. Remember, Russia lacked a sizable middle class, which is why they didn't have any revolutions that promoted liberalism economically, politically, and socially. This was a very key difference for why Russia lagged behind Western and Central Europe. They're lacking those troublemaking middle class. Okay, they don't have those bourgeoisie like they did in France. That's why Russia's lagging behind. And you think, well, it would be a good thing, right, to not have all these revolutions? But what do the revolutions do? Yeah, they evolve things. They get things going. And so not having those and being stagnant because they don't have a middle class is detrimental to Russia. And so this is going to bring us into Tsar Alexander II. He is perhaps the greatest, or I guess I should say, because that's kind of a polarizing word, the most liberal Tsar since Catherine the Great, and probably the most liberal ruler in Russian history prior to the 20th century. So pretty significant for his time. He believed serfdom had retarded or slowed down Russia's modernization. He believed that serfdom is the reason that Russia is behind. Agriculture had made Russia be poor for centuries, not even like a agriculture that's competitive. 90% of Russian people worked in agriculture, and serfdom had led to peasant uprisings, poor agricultural output, and exploitation of serfs by lords. He's going to say that serfs, there's millions of these, and that serfdom is the reason Russia's behind. So he's going to say, my question is, how do you get rid of serfdom? Remember, there's millions of serfs. It's kind of like when we tackled the slavery problem in the United States. What do you do with all of these serfs who've been indentured to this land if you free them? And Alexander II is going to try to tackle this problem. And he is going to start with the Emancipation Act or Emancipation Edict of 1861. It is the same time period as our very own American Civil War. So we're dealing kind of with the same issue as Russia is as far as labor force. Alexander believed ending serfdom was a key to Russia's modernization. Without letting the serfs out of this serfdom system, that Russia would never catch up with the rest of the world. He is going to abolish serfdom, and peasants will be no longer dependent on the lord and free to move and change occupations, which is a huge deal. They could enter contracts and own property. In fact, most Russians were not impacted by the Emancipation Edict, as we're going to see very quickly, they're going to take these serfs and be like, oh, you don't have to live on this lord's land, but they're going to move them into mirs, which are communes, which were highly regulated. So instead, they'll move all of these workers onto like highly regulated communes, and so not so much differently. The serfs short term situation doesn't change much, but long term, we're going to see some big changes. You're able to give serfs land now that is taken from the nobles. However, do you think they're going to give these newly free serfs like all of the best land? No, it's like crappy land that you can barely make money off of. So we're going to see short term, not a lot of changes to serfs' life. They'll have to pay, but it's not individual. We'll have collective ownership and responsibility. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't most of Russia still rural like this, or is it much developed outside of Moscow?
Yeah, a lot of rural. Yes, very much so. That hasn't changed too much.
What do you think a cause for that is? Is it just like the geographic isolation and how big Russia is, or are there...
I think a lot of it has to do with geography. I think the other part of it has to do with the 100 years they were behind, and then what we're coming up to, World War I, and what's going to happen here, and then into World War II. Definitely is going to play a number on that. I think there's just a lot of factors together. Also, this commune or shared land is going to be something we're going to see more of. So all of those things. We're also going to see Zemstvos established in 1864, which are assemblies that administer local areas. And this is going to be a significant step towards popular participation. Other reforms that Alexander's going to make, the judiciary is going to improve. We're going to see that nobles lose their say over the serfs. So nobles who had, remember we had that, nobles and we had serfs, no middle class or really working class. And so we're going to see that they lose that power to tell serfs what to do, so no noble courts. We're going to see the push for a national Zemstvo, which is a Duma, D-U-M-A. We're going to see that as we move forward today. We're going to see that education becomes liberalized, censorship will be relaxed but not removed, and industrialization, finally guys, finally, you can mark here, put a star next to it. Industrialization in Russia is finally going to be stimulated by railroad construction. And so we're going to see that railroad construction is going to open up manufacturing. We're going to see railroad mileage grow from 1,200 to about 15,000. Just in the span of 1860 to 1880, so 20 years. That's pretty significant. We're going to see that suburbs will be allowed to grow up, just as we saw in other industrialized nations. We're going to see strengthening in Russia's military because it can expand from south and east. But what's going to happen is there's going to be a great deal of critics later on in Alexander II's reign. They're going to kind of take what he did, which is pretty prolific. He just freed all the serfs. At least moved them in a more positive direction and started the modernization of Russia through these railroads. And they're going to say the only reason you did all of this was to hold on to your family's power. It wasn't for us, it was for you, so that you could have all of this power. And he's going to have some very strong critics. And so what Alexander's pretty much going to do is pretty much screw you liberals. I did all of this for you, and you're going to come back at me with all of this gripe? He is going to... He's going to tell them pretty much where to take it. And he is going to increasingly turn more traditional. He had been a very liberal guy. He had really, I think, genuinely felt that this was what was best for the country and did these liberal reforms not to keep his power, but to be what was best for Russia. And it's almost like, a pouty, oh, well, you don't like what I did, goes the other way. He goes conservative. Yes?
We just wanted to appreciate that Russia had all these reforms and advancements in the right to their serfs, which they had had for what? A couple hundred, maybe 1,000 or more years, without a freaking barricade in the streets.
No revolution. We'd had some peasant uprisings. But pretty much Alexander, props to him. I think he's great. The last great czar, the title of this biography of him. I think he was pretty great. I think that there must have just been some cranky peoples. I don't know. So, they tell him he just wants to hold power. He starts to turn conservative. Realism in Russia is going to replace romanticism. Okay, so this is kind of where we see that shift. Radical populist movements will emerge that sought a utopian agrarian order. This is where we get the intelligentsia, which is the hostile group of intellectuals who believe they should eventually take over society. These are really the people who have time to read, kind of ascribe to this, and this is where we get what is generally students' favorite of our kind of groups. Oops. And that is going to be nihilism, okay? Nihilism is our next group of individuals. Nihilism are intellectuals who believe in nothing but science. They believe in nothing. Anybody seen the movie Big Lebowski? Okay, and so remember when Bunny Lebowski is taken? And who does the dude say's got her? What kind of people?
It's been a while since
Yeah,
I've seen.
he says it's a nihilist. He's like, they don't care about anything. This is horrible. Like, they don't care. And they don't. Nihilist, if you look at the definition up here from Webster's Dictionary, it's a denial of the existence of any basis for knowledge or truth. The general rejection of customary beliefs in morality, religion, etc., or the belief that there is no meaning or purpose in existence. So if you were to put it into equation form, nihilism equals existence divided by existence times 0 is nihilism. I wish there was a better way to explain it, but they literally believe in nothing.
So
Like,
they go to school?
they're like intellectuals, but they don't believe. Yeah, they don't believe.
So they went to go learn.
They believe that the social order then, because they don't believe in anything, should just be wiped out, and we should start over from scratch. Like nothing that is here is real, and everything should be scrapped. Yes, there are still nihilists out there. In fact, when I was searching for these funny little things to put on here, there are all kinds of T-shirts and things you can buy. Yeah. And so, a modern day example that might explain nihilism to you, because students who I would think would like grasp onto this and be like, yeah, I believe in nothing. You generally like, I don't understand. So the guy is it Leffner who shot the congresswoman from Arizona?
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, they asked him why, and he's like, because I wanted people to ask why. I did it for no reason. I had no reason. He's a nihilist. I just want people to understand there's no reason. Nothing is, like, none of this is real. He went out, and he wants people to realize he shot her for no reason. Like, when interviewed, whenever, there's no reason, and people thought he was, like, crazy.
Was he
Well, he might,
mentally ill, though?
he's a nihilist. He believes in nothing. He's like, I just want to show people that you can do things for no reason. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no reason. He's a nihilist. So,
That's like a child, you know, when kids do stuff.
Okay, so I feel like we should get
We have to read this freaking book in English called The Stranger, or what's it called? Strangers? And like, no, I read it, and like, it was basically like, it's just like everything happened just because it happened. But
Yeah.
that'd be like the same thing.
yeah, kind of like there is no reason for
Like it just
yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah, so they believe like everything should be wiped clean because nothing is real.
Really?
So
I feel like maybe that equation should go on the back of the shirt.
nihilism, existence divided by existence times 0. Yeah. I don't know. The other class will get to see it tomorrow. We'll see what they think. So, Alexander II then. Speaking of assassinations, which we've talked about several already today, next to Rasputin, the assassination attempts to Alexander II are my second, like, I'm like, whoa. I would just, like, die by falling down some stairs. Like, this guy, they have, like, a gun, and they try to assassinate him, like, and they're not talking, like, far away. Like, close to him, and, like, move, like, he doesn't die, doesn't even get shot, I don't know how. And then they try to put a bomb on the train tracks where his train's on, and it, like, mistimes by, like, just barely a little bit, and he survives. And then they put a bomb under his dining room table, and they miss, or at a restaurant, and miss him by 30 minutes to just blow up an empty table. And then he is outside, and it's always cold in Russia, and there's snowballs. And so these guys have grenades with snowballs packed around them. And so they're like having like a snowball fight and trying to kill him with them, but like not to make it look like an assassination attempt, or that he can tell he's trying to assassinate. And so they throw one, and like he bends down to get something and misses him and hits this other guy. And so being the nice guy that he is, he stops to help that guy and then makes himself a non-moving, very easy target. And so they throw one, it's at his feet, he kind of looks at it, it's a snowball, and it blows up and it like debilitates the bottom of his body, but he's not dead. Okay, so they take him and they take him to the Winter Palace. He's mangled, but he's not dead. They take him. It's 20 years to the day, by the way. 20 years to the day he freed the serfs. I mean, like, how bad is that? Like, 20 years to the day that he freed all the serfs. They take him to the Winter Palace, and this is where I'm like, Russians are beasts.
Who is they?
Oh, his guards, like the Russians, his supporters. He's not dead. He's just debilitated. They take him to the Winter Palace, and this is like so. Do anybody know what family he's from? Like, what's the line of czars? Romanov. So they bring all of the children. I'm talking like he's like mangled, little children in, and they point at him and they go like, "You don't want to be like Grandpa Alexander. Look what your people will do to you." And so this is where like all of the next Romanov rulers become like mean. I am not helping my people. Look at Grandpa Alexander did, freeing all those serfs, and they try to blow his legs off. Like, and so the Romanovs historically from this time become very steely and conservative and against their people. I mean, if I were a little kid and you're marched in, look at Grandpa's legs, like I'd be like, ah. And so we're gonna see the Romanovs become very tough here. And because you don't want to be liberal like your grandfather, look what happened. What's kind of crazy about this is the day before Alexander gets killed by this deadly, because he will die of his injuries, killed by this deadly snowball, he was drafting up the Duma, which is the legislative body. It would be Russia's like first to support the people. And so his son, who comes in after him, who's just been like taken to his daddy, like whip the blankets off, look at his legs, look at being nice dude. He like goes in, and the first thing he does after his dad dies is he goes into an office and rips up the paper. Yeah, and so this is where the Romanovs be like, cha, like, yeah. Yeah. So, and now doesn't that make like Louis look like a whiny little baby because the nobles like fretted over him when he was a kid? Remember how traumatized he was by that? Think about the Romanovs. Like, they're like, look at Grandpa. So before our next czar, and our fun with some more assassinations and such, we have Count S.Y. Vit. The S stands for Sergei, so Sergei Vit oversaw a Russian industrialization in the 1890s. And so in between Alexander, there's this count. And he's not like a ruler, but he's going to help continue on this modernization of Russia and trying to improve it here. So we'll see that he starts to aggressively court Western capital and advance technology to build great factories. So we still have Russia here trying to modernize, even though Alexander's been laid to rest and we're going to be conservative everywhere else. We'll see, and finally, a Russian middle class. Like, yay, finally, some troublemakers. We have a middle class. Government-built state-owned railroads doubled to 35,000 miles by 1900. So that is huge because they've gone from 2,000. Construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway. This is a very famous railway. It still exists today. You could go for a ride on it if you wanted to, if you make it to Russia. Yeah, it connects 5,000 miles. It's a very long railroad. Russia is going to be, I think it goes even up to almost to Korea. Like, it's forever long. Russia's put on the gold standard. Russia becomes fourth in steel production, so not too shabby from being 100 years behind USA, Germany, and Britain. By 1900, Russia will export half the world's refined petroleum, still very big in oil, which is why all of this stuff going on right now, not good. Not good. Same thing. That's why we didn't mess with them back then. What? Yes, as far as I know. Did you know those people are on Google Earth and stuff trying to, but they see, the last I saw on the news, was it Saturday morning? They found this big entity in the ocean, so I think they're checking that out. But
Wait, what? The plane is in a hangar.
Oh, that's happening?
No.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas. A group of people who didn't want to get in trouble trouble for not showing up to work for a week. No. So, oh, as in Western Europe, industrialization in Russia continued to spread Marxist thought. And transformation of the Russian Revolutionary Movement after 1890, as industrial workers felt exploited. You know, I think that as far as the workers go in Russia, I don't know, kind of complainy. I mean, I don't know. Could it be? Is it worse? At least you're getting to work like in the city and stuff. Could it be any worse than a peasant on a mirror? I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see that coming up. But despite these economic and social reforms, Russia's economic problems will still be staggering by 1900. 1/3 of Russian farmland will not be used. Food cannot keep pace with the high population. Depression of 1899 will wipe out grains. Tremendous unemployment. And we're going to see coming up Russo-Japanese War of 1905. The Russians are going to go into this and very much underestimate the Japanese and say they're racist, kind of like white Europeans. They're going to be like, oh, we can beat those Asians, and they're going to be they're going to be proven wrong. Yeah, she picks random words. I like it. She's bursts of laughter. So guys, we only have 2 more czars left before we have no more czars in Russia. You can write this right here as we get to Alexander III. So Alexander III is probably the son of whom? Alexander II, and Alexander II has died how? Yeah, like snowball grenades. Yeah, that's crazy, right? So Alexander III, has he been trained to be all sweet and nice to his people? No. He is like, I will not be nice. That is not what you want to do. That will get you no legs. And so he's going to become the most reactionary. Where his father had been the most liberals are, he's going to become the most reactionary. I've used reactionary before in this class. What does that mean? Yeah, this happens, I immediately react to it. I'm immediately trying to push back the other way. He is known for autocracy, orthodoxy, and Russification. That pretty much means me, the church, and nationalism. Okay, that's what that breaks down to. Me, the church, and nationalism. He is going to create Russian schools, that really focus on how to be a Russian. He's still really focused on that Holy Russia, like the Third Rome. He wants to be Moscow and the Orthodox Church. Through this, he's going to encourage anti-Semitism. So if you think about Ferdinand and Isabella, when we talked about their push against the Protestants, this is Alexander III's push against the Jews, push against the others, the people who are different. And so we're going to see pogroms here of the 1880s result in severe persecution of the Jews. We will get many of the Jewish population immigrating to the United States at this time. Yes, ma'am.
What year is this?
What year are we in? We're in about 1881. 1880s throughout.
Did you actually
What?
You also BS with that. I put the color.
You didn't remind me
I put the color.
about asking my grandma.
Oh yeah, somebody. Let's everybody message Maddie independently. Yeah. A pogrom means to destroy or to wreak havoc, and so that's what they're really doing to the Jewish population. Remember, Poland is incorporated into Russia at this time, so we have 200 pogroms will take place just in this amount of time. We're going to see Jews blamed for the assassination of Alexander II, even though they had nothing to do with it. Kind of like the Jews were blamed for the Black Death. Nothing to do with it. Amoeba on fleas on rats, but the Jews are blamed. We're going to see them blamed for Alexander II's assassination. Thousands of Jewish homes will be destroyed. Businesses will be disrupted of Jewish peoples or destroyed, and many more Jews will be killed actually under Nicholas II than under Alexander III, but he's probably most remembered for this anti-Semitism because he gives us the May laws from 1882 to 1914 all the way up to World War I. And this is where we get the Jewish question. So we've covered the Irish question, we've covered the Eastern question, this is the Jewish question. And this is his answer to the Jewish question. 1/3 of the Jews we should force to migrate to get the heck out of Russia.
Why 1/3?
Because he breaks it into three 1/3, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's right. And the second 1/3 we should convert to Orthodoxy, just make them give up their faith. And then the third, 1/3, he's going to say we should starve to death. Like, this is the perfect combination or mathematical formula. Yeah. This is like this is the perfect solution, he said, to his problem. These laws will take place up to World War I, are really going to set the tone in Russia and Poland for the Jewish population. Jews will not be allowed to live in rural areas up to World War I, because I guess this keeps them from getting like villages that are all Jewish. And so we'll see all of this. So we're going to get people who push back, like Theodore Herzl, and Zionism. And Zionism is the belief that Jews should have their own homeland. And so we're going to have people say, to answer this problem, we should have our own homeland. Jews should have their own home, because what happens is we keep going places because we keep getting persecuted places, and the more of us that go there, then persecution starts in this new area. And the only way to stop this vicious cycle that's been going on since forever is to have our own homeland. And so he's going to say we need a place where we can be safe. He is from France, so he firsthand witnessed the Dreyfus affair and what happens to you when you're a Jew and you're scapegoated for something. And so he's going to say we need a place where there's no persecution, because every time we move somewhere, then persecution starts. We need our own state. And he meets with the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, that's still holding on, our sick man of Europe, but the Ottoman Empire is still holding the Holy Land. And he's saying, look, like, can we just like have our Holy Land and have our home back? And the Sultan's like, no, absolutely not. You cannot have it back. He's going to say, but I think he even gives a quote like, from my dead dismembered body will this be ripped from the Ottoman Empire. But he says then to be very nice, like not to make him think that he's not being reasonable. But if we should fall apart the Ottoman Empire, you can have it for free or fight whoever comes in to take it. So it's like, hey. And so we know that this, is going to happen. Hopefully, there's a little place called Palestine right now that we're going to see a homeland later. But we'll get to that as we move on. So next topic, the British kind of jump in and they tell Herzl, well, Sultan said you can't have the Holy Land. We have this really great place in, I can't even say it with a straight face. We have this really great place in Eastern Africa called Uganda. You can have that and make it your home. And so you know how much the Jews are being persecuted. Like, they're like, no, we don't want that place. Like, they're like, you can have it. They're, I don't, sorry. We're going to turn you down. And Great Britain was like, well, then we'll provide you protection there, too. And they're like, no, sorry, no sale. Have you seen it there? And I'm like, oh, my God, the Great Britain promised you protection in a homeland. I know. So Herzl's going to die in 1904, and the focus will turn away from the rejected Uganda by the Jews back to Palestine, back to Israel. I'm sorry, which will be, we'll see Palestine coming up. So they'll focus Zionism back there, and that's going to bring us up to Nicholas II, our next to last czar. He's our next czar. He's the last of the Romanovs. He is 26 years old when his father dies and he takes over, and he is going to enter right into a very questionable time period here, which is called the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. So the Russians are seeing this modernization, and then they start to see Japan moving kind of their way, and they don't like it, like into Korea and stuff. They're like, oh, stop that. They're just, they're, as most of Europe is, or they're kind of racist. Oh, those Asian people won't be any problem. Stereotypes make lectures go fast. At this time anyway, they'd be like, we're not worried about those Asians. So the Russians go against the Japanese, and they are humiliated in a defeat, naval defeat. Okay, their fleet is defeated by the Japanese. And this turns Russia, not only are they humiliated, like look what happened to them in the Crimean War, and now Japan has beat them. So this has got to be a pretty big blow to their self-esteem. They turn their attention from East Asia, and they focus instead, they focus instead on their, on the Balkans. So their attention's back to the Balkans. They kind of got whooped up on by Japan, pretty much. So they turn their attention to the Balkans all the way up to World War I. And so they're affected home. Anytime you get yourself hurt this badly in a war, we're going to start to see some revolutions at home. Like, it wasn't good for them. They got beat up. It's poor for the economy because they lost here. Peasants and the middle class are going to start demanding reforms because we now have a working class and middle class. And what does the working class and middle class always want to do? Stir things up. And so welcome to Russia. We are stirring things up. This is where we are going to get what is known as Bloody Sunday. So, Bloody Sunday. Here we go. On January 1905, 200,000 workers or peasants are going to march peacefully, like circle peacefully, underline peacefully, put an exclamation mark next to peacefully. They are so peaceful. They're Russian Orthodox. They are singing hymnals while they march. They're singing, I don't even know what a Russian hymn, like Kumbaya is what they're like. They're this peaceful. They're singing church songs as they're marching. And they just want to talk to the Tsar. So they're marching to the palace. But they don't know is the Tsar's been like out of town, gone for like 2 weeks. So they're marching there all peacefully to the Winter Palace. They're just going to ask the Tsar for some reforms. Like, this is their first time. They're like, ooh, I'm a middle class or working class. I should go ask the Tsar for some reforms. And so they're marching. A general strike happens. Peasant revolt and troop mutinies are paralyzed by the Russia by October. So what's going to happen is the troops start to fire on this very peaceful crowd. 1,000 will die. We're going to see that this infuriates all of the peasants and the workers, and this is going to lead to other revolts. And so we're going to see mutinies paralyzed by Russia in October, and the Tsar will be forced to make concessions. Now remember, he is not like Alexander. Okay, he doesn't want to be liberal. He's going to be forced by all of these mutinies. Okay, pretty soon the Russian troops are going to go like, why are we firing on our own people? And they're going to stop supporting him. And so he's going to have to start to make concessions. This is where, remember that document that got torn up? This is where we get the Duma, or the legislative body, back. Not because he wanted to, but because he has to, because the liberals are pushing for it. He's going to grant freedom of speech, assembly, and press. He's going to retain, however, the absolute veto. Like, he's going to say, hey, you can say you don't want something, but I get the absolute say. We're also going to see revolutionaries will be divided, resulting in the Duma having no real influence. So you'll start to see people on one side are like, yay, victorious, and people on the other side are like, hey, you're not so smart. He didn't really give us anything because we don't have absolute say. He does. So we'll see people split. Property classes benefit at the expense of workers. So we're going to start to see that happen in Russia as well. This is going to lead us up to, I hope you know there's going to be a Russian Revolution of 1917. So this will lead you up to that. And so Russia's going to experience mild economic recovery between 1907 and 1914 after this Russo-Japanese War. We're going to see a little bit of economic recovery come with the Duma, and the working class and peasants have, gotten some stuff done. Peter Stolypin will push through important agrarian reforms to break down collective village ownership. This is going to be really important. Put out to the side here. During this time, peasants will now be able to own land. Does anybody know what landowning peasants in Russia are called? It's going to become very important later because they're going to try to kill them all. No? Kulaks. K-O-U-L-A-K are landowning peasants. They're going to get to own land, and later when the Russian government tries to take it back from them in communism, they're going to be, you know how long I waited hundreds and hundreds of years to own this piece of land? You're not taking it back. So then they're going to try to kill all the kulaks, okay, because they don't want to give their land back. And in 1911, we're going to see that the Tsar's court becomes increasingly dominated by a mystic monk called Grigory Rasputin. Probably a familiar name to you. There's a lot of talk about this guy. So here's a lot of pictures of Nicholas II's family. Nicholas II, his wife, and his family. Here again, here's Nicholas. He's very much always in his military wear. But here's Here's Rasputin with the family of children. And what happens is Rasputin is a monk, but he is not like a lot of monks you talk about. First of all, very political. Second of all, he's very much known for bragging about his genitalia, publicly. He's very proud of it. And you know how monks wear robes? So when women are there, he'll just be like, "Wacha, wacha," to try to impress women. like not the monk you would think of, and
Was he the bad guy?
yeah.
Was he the
Yeah, he,
Girl?
and because he's kind of like out there, he's also a mystic. So, Nicholas's son has hemophilia, and so he bleeds. Like if he bruises himself, he's continually bleeding on the inside. If he falls and cuts himself, he bleeds. So he's very pampered as a child. Although they let him play and do normal things, they put like straw and stuff down so he won't fall and bruise himself. And so he's really sick all the time. And so Rasputin is also a mystic, and so thinks he has healing powers. It said that one time, because the telephone's even around, that he called, that Nicholas's wife called Alexandra, and he was able to heal the child over the phone. Like, child's bleeding profusely, and he says it's blah, 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 some chant, and the child stops bleeding. And so she begins to resort all this faith in him. Nicholas is out dealing with the revolutions, and Rasputin gets very close to the family and is kind of like, some people would say, having too much influence. And you all know kind of how the story goes, and we're going to see that. But it brings question in about the Tsar's ability to lead. And also what's going to be coupled with that is Russia's poor performance in World War I is also going to come to question in the Romanov family. And so we're going to see, we'll pick up there with Imperialism in Europe 8.3 on Wednesday. So let me stop my recording. I'll give you your